Hi. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for being here and joining us. We're just so happy to be here this afternoon with you. I'm here with my best pal, Monique. We're going to just talk a little bit about who we are, what we're up to, and our new and exciting project that we can't wait to share with you. So,
and by the way, I don't know why we're being so formal because this is just not us at all. We are so excited. You should have seen us like 2 seconds ago. We were cackling. We were all over this place, like trying to stage the perfect background, and then we just realized.
I went to Central Court, and I'm so hot right now from moving all this stuff. I'm still going to take this off, but we were not going to. Okay, here's what the real deal. This is what you really get.
Right.
Best friends from day one.
Yeah.
Now putting together a life together that we just, the life of our dreams, actually, truly. Like when we grew up in a little small town in Michigan, well, you go.
So we grew up right down the street from each other. Our parents raised us together. We did everything together in school. And if you saw one of us, you usually saw the other person right next to the other one. And we spent a lot of time in Kate's house.
Yeah.
She shared a room with her sister Maggie in the attic.
The attic.
And so we spent a lot of time up there just kind of sitting around thinking about how our lives would be, how we would grow up together, raising kids, and who we would fall in love with, who we'd marry, what we would do with our lives. And I think God and we went to different parts of the country and the world in some instances. Mm-hmm. And I think God in his infinite wisdom just decided to pull us back together. Because one of the things I think we took for granted, Kate, is we thought probably all of this was going to be easy.
Oh my God. Right.
And it just wasn't. But we ended up in the same city again. And now we're raising our children, I think, together and in a way that we always dreamed about, but it hasn't always been easy.
Yeah, exactly that. It's one of those things, too, in our little small town in Michigan that we couldn't wait to leave.
We could not wait to get out of
We thought it was too small.
Yeah.
Not us. We needed more culture.
Yep.
We needed more experiences. We needed all that. And the world was going to give that to us. And little did we know that the life that we were really craving after all of that was so much like the life that we grew up.
That we already had.
Yeah, that we already had. And the best friends that we already had too. Having journeyed to all over these places and then to come back to each other. To come to each other when we really, really needed each other the most as mothers. Going through the process of, trying to conceive and start families and have, go through dating and all of these things. It's just... Again, it's God putting us in the right place again and reminding us of what was there all along.
We also realized, I think, that while we were going through all of these challenges together, and we had each other, and we were very blessed to have each other, but we also realized that there was a really significant gap in the market, and lots of our friends who were going through some of the same things, we couldn't really find resources to help us understand what was going on with our bodies, understand what was going on with our minds, and really understand what God had in store for our lives. And so I think, Kate, tell me how the story of us began.
Oh my God. Okay, so this process of working and writing this book started so much earlier than it actually got onto paper, right? And Monique's been with me in the writing of this process for over 2 years.
Over 2 years.
Because it had a lot of different origin stories and where I thought it might end up going, and maybe still will. It's just such a conversation that I hope is going to be continuing in wider spread circles forever and ever. But in any case, it started with, Ryan and I going through trying to conceive. We finally found my partner after being divorced, coming home to Chicago. I've had a lot of coming home type of moments in my life. A lot of leaving my own home, my home of familiarity, and choosing new things, only to find out that I needed to come back home again, right? That's kind of like the heroine story of our lives, but I surely didn't feel like that for a lot of it. So I found my partner here in Chicago on the dating apps, and we decided to, want to start a family, want to be married, and all of this. And in my mind, all that I knew was the way I was raised. All that I knew was our lives growing up. And already this partner of mine had a child from a previous relationship. Already I was going to start to enter into, a different culture, a different background racially than myself.
Mm-hmm.
Already I was moving into a blended family, and I knew somehow God was telling me that this was going to be conversations that I wasn't used to, and that I would have to learn the right, good, honest, authentic language, and inclusive language, right? So anyway, we got married, we started trying to conceive, and I come from a huge family, and my sisters and brothers all have kids, and there didn't seem to be anybody else who was going through what I was going through. And as a matter of fact, as a woman of faith, I was really struggling. I felt like I shouldn't talk about that. It should be quiet. It was sinful to have assisted reproduction of any kind. And I was really alone and isolated. And Monique was one of the only people I could talk to about that.
And I just always knew that she was going to have this baby. And I remember I can't remember where we were, some coffee shop or something. I just remember there being a bunch of stairs. And it was just a really hard time. And I remember saying to Kate, I'm not worried about you having a baby. You're gonna have a baby. It's gonna be delicious. Like, this whole process is gonna be amazing, but it's not gonna be easy. And so I think we just sort of knew, again, that we weren't gonna have this idyllic journey to parenthood that we had in our childhood.
That's right.
That we took for granted.
That's really a wise point. Like, parenthood for us was going to be a whole new life, a whole different than our childhood.
Yeah.
So I continued on my journey. We started going to different fertility clinics. I went through, three rounds of IVF that failed, and we did get pregnant, and then that didn't stay. And we went through 2 IUIs that also didn't work. And my partner was seeing me go through some really tough ups and downs, and he was too. But for me, anybody who's been through this knows you get your heart just filled with possibility.
Yeah.
You're in this waiting period. You're on all these medications. You're trying to do it so right, and you're keeping it so quiet, and then it doesn't work for whatever reason, and you're crashed back down to the bottom, and then you're starting over, and it was just so painful, and mostly painful because I chose not to share it, because I didn't think people would understand. I thought I was the only one going through it, and I thought I would be receiving shame and guilt and all of that stuff.
Which breaks my heart, because this woman is, she was made to be a mom. First of all, anyone who also knows her mom, and just the amazing, nurturing, intuitive, instructive woman that she is. And then to see Kate knowing that she wanted to be that same force in a baby's life. And you use the word crashed, and I heard crushed, because that's what I saw every time she would go through these cycles. It was just this crushing of a spirit that is so big and boisterous and full of life. To see that life was eluding her was just, as someone who loves her and from the outside watching, it was just heartbreaking. But again, as women of faith, it was deflating, but it wasn't defeating.
Amen.
And it didn't defeat you.
That's right. No storm can shake our inmost calm,
Yeah.
right? And that is the thing. Holding on to God throughout this process was like, that was my life preserver through everything, and continues to be. And so fast forward briefly through a lot of pain and struggle, not because I don't want to talk about that. I want to say I'm really open about that, and I want to be a source if that's at all valuable, if you're going through that too. But moving through, the miracle happens and we get pregnant, and this time I'm thinking it feels different, right? And I prayed and prayed, and I let things go, and I let go of my control, and this happens, and quiet about the pregnancy for a really long time for the same reasons. I didn't feel like I could celebrate it. I felt like I was walking so fearfully through life, you know? And it goes and goes and goes and goes, and finally he's here. And it's the most miraculous thing, but I didn't know how to handle that. It was the middle of COVID, and we were all wearing masks, and it was pouring down snow in January, and I was still isolated. And postpartum kicks in, and like Nikki said, I did not get to, I didn't feel I had those skills. Somebody gave me a book of phone numbers at the hospital, if you're feeling blue. And I didn't know. Of course I wasn't going to call any of those numbers, right? Are you kidding me? They don't get it. They didn't know what was going on in my mind, in my head, and I was spinning out. And again, return to God, return to my healing, and return to the place that's never changed, which is this light of, you know, God within me, and start to bond with my son at last, and start to recognize that I am the one that has had this bond all along. I was fortunate to carry him, and that experience, just that blood that's shared, you know, it doesn't matter how it comes, but the fact that he was here.
Yeah.
And I decided to write a little story to him about how he got here and the miraculous story of him. It became this thing called The Story of Us, and it's a little picture book that I have. I should have busted it out today, but it's actually a picture of him and I.
That's right.
It starts with us. It's
Yeah.
pictures of me and him. It's pictures of all of our family and our friends, and it's just like, this is you. This is who you are. La la la. And I would read it to him every night before he went to bed. And God tends to come to us in those quiet times, and especially for us while I was nursing or whatever was happening. I'd be reading the book quiet at night, and I would, you know, pray, and we'd pray together, and we'd read this story. And God said the thing that I often hear from God, which is, this is not just about you. And all of a sudden, it was a moment. I'm telling y'all, it was a shaking from within, and I realized that this story of us is a story of us, and that all the incredible ways that babies can come into our lives. Adoption is part of my family story, and blended families and stepmothers are part of my story. I have so many dear friends from different types of couples that are having these same struggles, and it doesn't discriminate in fertility and problems like this. And so I wanted to write a different kind of book that represented, to the best of my ability, all of that. And also, most chiefly, says that you can hold both things. You can be a faithful woman and also have gone through this stuff to recognize that every single being is a child of God. So that's the story.
That's the story. Yeah, and there are so many different twists and turns to this story. I mean, I don't know that we could ever really get into everything, but that's the case for everyone who goes through this journey. No one could ever really know what it feels like for that person in the middle of the night when you're wondering what tomorrow's going to bring, or when you take that first pregnancy test and it's negative, and then you take another and another and another, and they're all negative. And but that's a part of the story, and that's what I think you have wanted to hear from everyone.
Yes.
And I think that probably is kind of the cornerstone of this project.
That's the cornerstone of the project. And truth be told, since I come from a musical background, and that's part of our story too, is music, it started out by writing a musical about all of this. And it moved in from that iteration to something else. And we thought, maybe this will be a TV series. Maybe this will be, who even knows? How can it reach? How can it reach people that need to hear the message? And how can it make the most impact? And so it's starting with this. But our dream is that, as we say in this tagline on the back of the book is just the beginning. We hope that we are part of a conversation to the next generation of families raising these children to have stigma-free conversations, inclusive conversations, loving conversations, and to create a support network for people like us.
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
We have been meeting for how long? 2 years-ish? Every week.
Yep.
Took a little writing retreat at some point, and I just remember Kate coming to each session with a new idea. Every session, a new idea, you know, each one better than the last. And this book that she has written, we've fallen in love with the illustrations, but the story, the words, are so, so beautiful, and I do believe that they really do include everyone.
Yeah. So we are, this book, The Story of Us Here, this is it. It's available for purchase on Amazon right now. But our goal is to spread the message included within this book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so our dream is to take this to women's clinics and support groups and podcasts, hospital settings,
Yep.
Healthcare, all of that for sure, but also wherever people are gathering that could benefit from hearing this inclusive message. And so we're hoping that it can spread in the best way possible. So that's our hope here, is to get this message out to you, and maybe you know somebody who's affected by this, that is impacted by this, and you'll spread the message too, because this is the story of all of us.
I was telling Kate, I think one of my favorite pages of the book is the first page, where it just says, this book belongs to, I don't know if you guys can see this, but this book belongs to, and then there's a blank spot, of course, because it's a children's book for families, but the nice thing about it is that I can think of so many people who can add their names there, and and all of these people can kind of feel a part of this journey.
And that's what we tried to do. Again, I'll just give you a little preview if you don't already have this book. And I can tell you, part of our conversation that we want to have is how we chose these types of illustrations, right? This idea of inclusivity, and also, for me, a baptism in a way into a new life, a transformation that this healing has created for me. So this is the book belongs to, and the possibility is any one of you who have their name here. There's this image of throwing a bottle out into the water, again with the water imagery, to let a message be sent out that anybody that needs to hear it is going to receive. And it just starts to show these families, these couples, in all of these beautiful ways. And prayer is at the center of all of it. And so this is the story that we want to tell. This is the story we hope you want to tell. And we have a website, storyofus.love, where we hope that you will start to share your story too. We recognize how hard that can be.
Yeah.
We get that this is can feel itchy for people, right? But I feel like the only way to live now for me is truthfully and honestly for this. The only way to stand up for my son and how he arrived here is to stand in its truth and in its miraculous nature.
Yeah.
And I want to radiate pride about all of that stuff, and I do. And so there's going to be no stigma around those conversations for us and our children, and we want this community to feel that same way for you.
So welcome.
So welcome. See you soon.
Bye, everybody.